Pacifica Radio, I'm Christina Onnested. Mexico has elected its first woman president, Claudia Sheinbaum, by a sweeping margin. The climate scientist and former Mexico City mayor said Sunday night that her two competitors had called her to concede. She said, for the first time in 200 years of the Republic, I will become the first female president of Mexico. She's won upwards of 60% of the vote. Opposition candidate Xochitl Galvez had upwards of 28%. It was the first time Mexico's two main opponents were women. Galvez called the election a historic milestone and advance on gender equality despite her loss. South Africa's ANC, African National Congress Party, lost its control of parliament for the first time since the end of apartheid. White minority rule 30 years ago. The party of Nelson Mandela now is working to form a ruling coalition. Here's President Cyril Ramaphosa conceding losing power.
Our people have spoken. Whether we like it or not, they have spoken. And we must respect their choices and their wishes. What this election has made plain is that the people of South Africa expect their leaders to work together to meet their needs.
The final weekend results are still to be formally declared by the Independent Electoral Commission. Israeli strikes killed 11 people overnight and this morning, including a woman and 3 children in central Gaza, according to Palestinian health officials. The Israeli military said the body of a man presumed to be a hostage was found in a community near the Gaza border that Hamas militants attacked on October 7th. Israeli forces are also expanding their offensive in the southern city of Rafah, which President Joe Biden has called a red line. Israel's put that stance to test. Friday, President Biden laid out a 3-phase ceasefire deal to end the war in Gaza, saying Hamas no longer has the ability to launch another October 7th attack, which spurred Israel's war.
It's time to begin this new stage. For the hostages to come home, for Israel to be secure, for the suffering to stop. It's time for this war to end.
It would begin with a 6-week ceasefire exchange of some hostages, including women and the elderly. Phase 2 would be a permanent end to hostilities, and Phase 3 reconstruction. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called a permanent ceasefire in Gaza a non-starter until long-standing conditions for ending the war would be met. Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant Sunday said they're preparing a ruling alternative to Hamas. He made those comments during a visit to Israel's South Command. Families of hostages rallied in Jerusalem over the weekend outside Netanyahu's office, urging he pursue the ceasefire deal. Some of Netanyahu's far-right allies are threatening to collapse his government if he does negotiate with Hamas. Student protests continue against Israel's war in Gaza. Hundreds at the University of Chicago walked out of graduation Saturday. Students for Justice in Palestine says police blocked students walking out and used pepper spray on them. At the University of California, tensions are rising between police and activists. At UC Berkeley, a police car was set ablaze over the weekend by a purported incendiary device. It's being investigated as arson. It's supposedly in response to the UC's crackdown on student dissent and comes just days after 80 students were arrested at UC Santa Cruz Friday. Video reviewed by KPFA News shows at least 2 officers punching a protester hunched over at UC Santa Cruz. Meanwhile, a strike by academic workers on UC campuses is spreading in protest of the UC's handling of student dissent to the war and their demands on divesting from war profiteers. The strike at UC Santa Cruz, UCLA, and UC Davis continues. 3 more campuses will strike this week, UC San Diego and UC Santa Barbara today. It spreads to UC Irvine Wednesday. Irvine's Mayor Farah Khan addressed students on campus Sunday, voicing support, noting their actions have been peaceful.
I've been on campus and I've seen the encampment and I've seen the protesters and I've seen them as peaceful. So remember that. We have to continue repeating those words, that we do not get judged by someone that wasn't there, that did not know what was going on and doesn't care about what's happening. For those of us that care, we know we're doing it peacefully and we don't incite violence, but violence is incited upon us.
Her remarks counter UC administrators who have said the protests interfere with education and cause harm. Former President Donald Trump says he will appeal the guilty verdict against him. The likely Republican presidential nominee blasted the jury's verdict of guilty on all 34 counts related to hush money payments to silent stories that could have hurt his 2016 presidential bid, then covering them up in violation of New York election laws. Alex Gonzalez reports.
I don't know that the public would stand it. I'm not sure the public would stand for it.
Former president and now convicted felon Donald Trump told NBC he'd be okay if he gets jail or home confinement for falsifying business records to cover up hush money payments to adult actress Stormy Daniels. But Trump ominously warns that his followers might not accept it, and the public could hit what he calls a breaking point. Legal observers say prison time is unlikely for a 77-year-old first-time nonviolent offender. Trump is vowing to appeal once he's officially sentenced, which is scheduled just days before the Republican National Convention. His attorney, Will Scharf, is taking an aggressive tone.
We are going to take this as high and as far as we need to, including to the U.S. Supreme Court.
To make the picture more complex, Washington state doesn't allow convicted felons to appear on the ballot. In his first public statement about former President Trump's guilty verdict, President Joe Biden says it reaffirmed that no one is above the law. Biden is calling for Trump and his followers to respect the justice system and not undermine what Biden calls a cornerstone of America.
And it's reckless, it's dangerous, it's irresponsible for anyone to say this was rigged just because they don't like the verdict.
I'm Alex Gonzalez for Pacifica Network and Public News Service.
I'm Christina Onnested reporting for Pacifica Radio.